August 16, 1920. Ray Chapman, American baseball player, was having one of the best seasons of his career. The Yankees were in town. Polo Grounds was packed, and for 4 innings, it was just baseball. Then Chapman stepped into the batter's box in the 5th. Carl Mays was on the mound, and here's the first thing you need to understand about Mays. His delivery was unlike anything else in professional baseball. He threw almost underhand, a submarine release so low, it completely changed the angle the ball came from. Batters despised facing him because the ball arrived from a place their eyes weren't trained to track. The second thing you need to know is the baseballs weren't swapped out during games the way they are now. They stayed in play until they were nearly unrecognizable. On a late afternoon with shadows cutting long across the field, that ball was almost impossible to see. Chapman leaned in. That was how he always stood, crowding the plate, daring pitchers to come inside. Mays wound up and let it go. The ball never curved or dropped. It traveled exactly where Mays threw it, directly into the left side of Chapman's skull. The sound that came off the impact echoed into the upper deck. The umpire thought it had caught the handle of the bat. Mays himself walked toward the ball as it rolled back toward the mound, assuming it was a bunt, and threw to first base. Chapman didn't run. He took 2 or 3 steps, then stopped. His legs gave out. He was on his hands and knees in the dirt before anyone had fully processed what just happened. Blood was already coming from his left ear by the time his teammates reached. He was assistance off the barely upright, barely moving. That was the last time he moved under his own power. At St. Lawrence Hospital, doctors found the skull fracture so severe that a fragment of bone had been driven nearly an inch into the brain tissue. Emergency surgery began almost immediately. Surgeons removed a section of his skull to relieve the pressure that was building inside. 4:40 in the morning, Ray Chapman was pronounced dead. He was 29 years old. More than 100 years later, he remains the only player in Major League Baseball history to ever die from an injury suffered during a game. But here's what his death changed permanently. The league banned the spitball and every other pitch that involved intentionally doctoring the ball. More importantly, they introduced a practice so routine today that most fans never think about it. Umpires pulling dirty balls from play and replacing them with clean ones throughout every game. The crowd is on its feet, your teammates are sprinting toward you, you raise both arms, and then you die. That is exactly what happened on November 29, 2017, in a gymnasium in Parauapebas, Brazil. Santos de Souza was 38 years old goalkeeper in a regional futsal league. Amateur level, small gym, nothing that would ever make a national headline under normal circumstances. But the match was tight, the final minutes were intense, and the opposing team had just been awarded a penalty. Santos set himself in goal. The shooter approached. The shot came hard and fast, aimed straight down the middle. Santos didn't guess a corner. He stepped forward, made himself as large as possible, and let the ball hit him squarely in the chest. Clean block. Ball deflected wide. Match effectively decided. His teammates swarmed, celebrating, laughing, arms around his shoulders. For about 5 seconds, everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. Then his expression changed. Not pain, just confusion. Like he couldn't locate where he was. A teammate caught him as his legs buckled. He was unconscious before he reached the floor. There was no wound. Nothing visible. Nothing a doctor standing in that gym could have pointed to. The block had looked completely unremarkable. PR started within seconds. A defibrillator reached the court minutes later. The medical team worked for nearly 20 minutes. Nothing brought him back. Santos de Souza was pronounced dead at the scene. The save that ended the game ended his life in the same instant. July 14, 1912. The Stockholm Olympics. The marathon. Francisco Lázaro was 21 years old, representing Portugal in one of the most demanding events in sport. 68 competitors lined up that afternoon in conditions that were brutal, even by Scandinavian summer standards. Nearly 90 degrees Fahrenheit, high humidity, no cloud cover, no wind off the water. What nobody on the course knew was what Lázaro had done to his body that morning before he arrived. Before the race, he coated large sections of his skin in animal fat. Lard, essentially. The logic seemed sound at the time. Many athletes and their trainers believed it would shield the skin from burning and reduce water loss through perspiration. It was standard preparation in certain athletic circles. Coaches endorsed it. Lázaro followed the advice without question. The race started at 1:45 in the afternoon. For the first 10 kilometers, he looked strong, steady pace, calm expression, moving efficiently through the pack. Nothing alarming, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. The heat he was generating with every stride had nowhere to go. His core temperature was climbing with each mile, and because his skin couldn't sweat, it showed no signs from the outside. While other runners were visibly suffering. By the 30-kilometer mark, he drifted off the road without warning. His legs stopped working. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. Medical staff who reached him found something that initially didn't make sense. His skin was burning hot to the touch, but completely dry. His core temperature had climbed to a level where organ failure had already begun. They poured water over him. They rushed him to the nearest medical facility. For hours, doctors fought to bring his temperature down and stabilize his vital signs. The damage had been accumulating for over 2 hours. It was already done. Francisco Lázaro died the following morning, never regaining consciousness. He became the first athlete to die in competition during the modern Olympic era. The autopsy confirmed what the doctors on the course had suspected: extreme dehydration, complete electrolyte collapse, multiple organ failure. And the thing that killed him was the lard, the sealed skin trapping all the heat. Nobody questioned, not his coaches, not the medical staff, not him. They all believed it was protecting. March 15, 1971. Retaille, Belgium. A small local cycling race on quiet country roads. Jean-Pierre Montserrat was 22 years old and the reigning world cycling champion. In the sport of professional cycling, winning the world championship earns and the right to wear the rainbow jersey, a distinctive striped garment that marks you as the best cyclist on the planet for that entire year. Montserrat was 5 months into wearing, the youngest world champion the sport had seen in years. This race was as low stakes as it gets. A 10-kilometer circuit through the countryside near his hometown. No pressure, no cameras. The kind of event a world champion enters simply to stay sharp for the bigger races later in the season. He was near the front of a small breakaway group approaching the 4th kilometer, moving confidently. The rainbow jersey visible from the roadside. A car turn. Onto the course. An elderly man, unaware a race was happening. The road closures for this section of the route had not been properly communicated to all local residents. He drove directly into the oncoming group of cyclists. The riders who had room swerved. Most found a way through. Montserrat was on the outside edge of the group. There was no gap, nowhere to redirect. His front wheel caught the car's bumper at around 30 miles per hour. He cleared the handlebars, struck the windshield, and came down on the asphalt. The helmet he was wearing, standard issue for professional cycling in 1971, was a soft leather cap. By any modern standard, it offered almost no protection at all. He was motionless when he landed. A doctor from the crowd was performing resuscitation within minutes. Officials radioed for an ambulance. At 4:15 that afternoon, Jean-Pierre Montserrat pronounced dead at the scene. The impact had caused catastrophic trauma to his skull and cervical spine. He survived the collision by less than 30 minutes. He was 22 years old, 5 months into wearing the most recognized jersey in professional cycling. The road was supposed to be closed. One missed notification to one resident. That was the entire margin between that afternoon and a normal race result. July 29, 1983, the Commonwealth Pool in Edmonton, Canada. The World University Games. Sergei Chalabashvili was a 21-year-old Soviet diver, regarded as one of the most technically precise athletes in his sport. A reverse 3.5 somersault in the tuck position. Understand what goes wrong here? You need to understand the physics. That dive requires the diver to pull into a tight tuck, knees to chest, body compressed, and generate as much rotational speed as possible before opening up at exactly the right moment to enter the water cleanly. If you open up even slightly early, you bleed off rotational speed before completing the required turns. The body slows. The rotation falls short. Chalabashvili opened too early. Fractions of a second separated what happened from a clean entry. His body began to uncurl from the tuck just slightly ahead of when it should, and that small deviation was enough. He descended toward the water with insufficient rotation remaining. Instead of a vertical entry, the back of his head struck the concrete lip of the platform. Pool went silent immediately. Divers in the water reached him within seconds. Medical staff were there moments after. He was unconscious when they pulled him out. A serious wound at the back of his skull where it had made contact with the platform edge. At the University of Alberta Hospital, doctors found severe trauma to both brainstem and the cerebellum. The structures responsible for the most essential functions the body performed. He was placed on life support. For 9 days, there was no neurological activity. On August 7th, 1980, Sergei Chalabashvili's heart stopped. He was 21 years old, a margin of error measured in fractions of a second, in a movement he had practiced for years. Everything you've heard so far in this video involved something that could be traced back to a human decision. A ball left in play too long, a skin coating that blocked sweat, a road closure that was incomplete, a dive that opened a moment too soon. Every tragedy had a cause. February 22nd, 1992, Les Arcs, France, the Albertville Winter Olympics. Nicolas Bochatai was 27 years old, a Swiss speed skier and one of the favorites in what was being featured as a demonstration sport at those games. Speed skiing is exactly what it sounds like. Athletes in full aerodynamic suits, helmet, tight suit, specialized poles, crouch into a tuck, and fly straight down a prepared slope. No turns, no gates, pure velocity. The speeds regularly exceed 125 miles per hour. That morning, Bochatai and several teammates decided on a warm-up run on a marked trail beside the main competition course. Conditions were nearly perfect. Clear sky, firm snow, almost no wind. A casual descent to loosen up before the day's official training session. He accelerated through a gentle depression in the slope, body low, suit cutting through the cold air. He crested a small rise. A snowcat was parked directly in his path. Snowcat is a large tracked vehicle used to groom ski slopes, the machine responsible for flattening and conditioning the snow before athletes use it. This particular one had been maintaining a service road that crossed directly over the warm-up trail. No barriers had been set out, no warning signs, and critically, no radio communication existed between the grooming crew and the event coordinators. The operator had no information that athletes would be using this trail that morning. Attai struck the steel frame of the snowcat and died on impact. Massive internal hemorrhaging, multiple compound fractures, trauma to every major structure in his chest and abdomen. The investigation that followed established a complete breakdown in communication between two departments operating in the same space with no awareness of each other. The grooming crew had their schedule, the training team had theirs. Nobody had created a system to make those two things talk to each other. Olympic flags came down to half-mast. Speed skiing events were suspended indefinitely, and a man who had built his career around controlling extraordinary speed was killed at 68 miles per hour because nobody picked up a radio. Every story in this video so far had a lesson built into it, a rule that changed afterward, a gap in a system that got closed, a mistake that, once identified, could at least be correct. This last one ends differently. October 25th, 2018, Bojonegoro, Indonesia, a public football field, two local teams, an ordinary weekday match that had been running for over an hour. Raharjo was 35 years old, a midfielder with years of experience at the local level, moving well, reading the game, doing exactly what a veteran midfielder does on a typical afternoon. The weather had been threatening since before kickoff. Thick clouds, heavy humidity, humidity, thunder audible in the distance. Officials assessed it and let the match continue. In the 71st minute, rain began to fall. Light drops at first. Few players glanced up. Spectators opened umbrellas and stayed in their seats. Nobody left. Nobody saw what was coming. The storm had been intensifying directly above the field far faster than it appeared from the ground. At 4:17 in the afternoon, the entire pitch turned white. The bolt came down just above the center circle. On wet ground, the behavior of a lightning strike doesn't stay localized. The electrical discharge fans outward across the surface, following the moisture in every direction simultaneously. Raharjo, positioned near midfield, was directly in its path. His body convulsed and dropped backward in the same instant. Players nearby initially assumed he had slipped on the wet grass. Then one of them looked more closely. His jersey was smoke. Burns across his left shoulder and chest marked where the current had entered and traveled through. His pulse, when medical staff reached him, was already weak and irregular. CPR was performed in the mud as the rain intensified around. An ambulance arrived 7 minutes after the strike. In the emergency room, doctors found damage that no amount of resuscitation could address. The electrical current hadn't simply disrupted his heart's rhythm the way a normal cardiac event does. It had burned a physical path through the cardiac tissue itself. The muscle structure was destroyed permanently. There was nothing left to restart. At 5:42 that afternoon, 85 minutes after the lightning hit, Raharjo was pronounced dead. Meteorologists who reviewed the event later estimated the bolt had carried approximately 300 million volts of electricity through his body. The human heart fails permanently at a fraction of that. The match didn't resume. There was no announcement that changed the sport, no regulation introduced after the fact that made the situation preventable in a new way. Because unlike everything else in this video, unlike the dark ball and the sealed skin and the unmarked road and the silent radio, there was no human system that broke down here. No decision that could have gone differently. No rule that would have stopped just a player, a storm, and the sky doing exactly what it does. 7 athletes, 7 different sports, 7 mornings that started as completely ordinary days. And in every single case, the margin between routine and catastrophe was almost nothing. A ball that wasn't swapped out, a coating that blocked sweat, one car on one road, a rotation that opened half a second early, a radio that stayed silent, a storm that moved faster than anyone read it. That's the thing that stays with you after watching something like this. Not the deaths themselves, but how small the distance was. In almost every one of these moments, one different decision, one small thing going differently, and none of these stories exist.